Welcome, everyone. It is so great to see all of you joining us today. I am very, very pleased to welcome you. My name is Joy Johnson. I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of Simon Fraser University. And I want to welcome you to Passing the Torch, a conversation with Shirin Ebadi. I want to begin this event in a good way, and to do that, I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We are privileged at Simon Fraser University to have our campuses on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people. And today I would like to acknowledge the lands that I'm situated on. Those are the lands of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. It is indeed a privilege to work and play on these lands. And as a white settler on these lands, I think it's one important gesture of reconciliation that we acknowledge these lands. I want to thank all of you for being with us today. I'm really pleased to welcome so many of you to this event. There's so much interest. I want to thank today's organizers, SFU Center for Comparative Muslim Studies and the Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogue. I want thank you so much for all the work that you've done. The Center for Comparative Muslim Studies fosters academic and public discussions and understanding of Muslims, societies, and cultures. And we're so proud of this center at SFU for all that they do. The Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogue is a trusted convener of dialogue and engagement of events like this. And they really help to create a space for respectful conversations on issues of public importance and help build the capacity of others in the knowledge and practice of dialogue. Conversations like the one we're going to have today really help to reinforce community connections and foster cross-cultural collaboration and understanding, while delivering on SFU's mission to be Canada's engaged university. They give us an opportunity to highlight the achievements of extraordinary individuals like Shirin Ebadi. Dr. Ebadi is a scholar, lawyer, activist, and advocate for human rights, especially the rights of women, children, refugees, and political prisoners. She's a global leader in this work with a lifetime of achievements. In 2003, Dr. Ebadi became the first Muslim woman to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. We are absolutely thrilled to have her with us today to talk about the hard-won lessons that she has learned and to pass the torch to future generations of women advocates. Before going any further, I'd like to extend a special welcome to today's honored guest, Dr. Shirin Ebadi, and also her trusted translator, Shirin Ebadi. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to Aslam Bolbolibia from the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies to begin today's discussion. Aslam, over to you.
Thank you very much, President Johnson. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you here today as we get going with this really exciting and informative and delightful conversation that we'll be having with Dr. Shirin Ebadi. Thank you to President Johnson for the land acknowledgement. It's important that we recognize this land as unceded Coast Salish land that we're joining you from, and that's making this possible. To begin this conversation, I just wanted to make sure that we give a thanks to all of those who made this event possible, and just to let you know how the event will be run today. So just in a moment, I'll be handing over to the Director of the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies, Dr. Azadeh Yamini Hamdani, who will introduce Dr. Ebadi, who will then speak for the next 30 or so minutes with live translation. We'll then take a short break, and then we will return for a Q&A session with questions coming in through the live stream and also through the Q&A function in the Zoom recording. We'll then have some final thoughts shared by Dr. Ebadi before we wrap up. The session is being recorded, and just so everybody knows, when we're in this panelist webinar format, we can't see or hear you unless you're a panelist. So if you're just an attendee, you can walk around, you can move around, do the things that you need to take care of your body. We won't be able to hear or see you. Feel free to engage through the chat box by sending your questions through there or through the Q&A function. You'll also see that using the Q&A function, you can see questions that other folks have been asking, and you can upvote those questions if they're questions that you would like to see answered. We don't have too much time, but we'll try to get to as many questions as possible today. We'll also ask that you remain respectful and acknowledge that we've got people joining from 38 countries around the world. So we're sure that the diversity of opinions and perspectives over here will be held with respect, and that we'll seek to engage in respectful manners. With that, I'll hand over to Dr. Azadeh Yamini Hamdani to introduce Dr. Shirin. One last point is that this session will be recorded and will be shared out through the invite list as well as through the Center for Dialogue and Center for Comparative Muslim Studies social media channels. Thank you. Over to you, Azadeh.
Thank you, Aslam. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Shirin Ebadi. She has led an extraordinary and exemplary life. In 1970, at the age of 23, she became the first woman appointed judge in Iran. Following the Islamic Revolution, she was barred from her post on the basis of her gender and demoted to a clerkship by the very male colleagues with whom she had served in a court she once presided over as a judge. She fought for years to win back her law license and returned to the courts in 1992 as a private lawyer defending high-profile cases, championing the rights of women, children, refugees, and political prisoners. She has tirelessly advocated for female equality and sought in her practice to put unjust laws themselves on trial. She has brought systemic injustices to public attention and spurred through her work a much-needed public debate. For speaking truth to power, she has been subjected to systematic surveillance, ruthless intimidation and bullying tactics, and death threats throughout her career. In an effort to intimidate her, she was imprisoned and spent 3 weeks in solitary confinement. To silence her, her family has faced similar intimidation tactics. Since 2009, she has been living in exile. Dr. Ebadi has published over a dozen books on the rights of women, children, and refugees, and hundreds of articles on various aspects of human rights. After winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 2003, making her the first Muslim woman to heed the accolade, she co-founded the Nobel Women's Initiative to strengthen women's rights around the world. In addition to the Nobel, she has won the RAFTO, the Human Rights Watch Award, and the Legion of Honor, to name just a few. She is considered one of the 100 most influential women of all time. After winning the Nobel, Dr. Ebadi wrote a memoir, only to find that sanctions regulations in the United States made it virtually impossible for her to publish it. Rather than seek an exemption, she filed a lawsuit against the United States Treasury Department to fight for the principle of the right to freedom of speech and the right and responsibility of the American public to hear voices from around the world. She won the lawsuit, after which the Treasury Department revised its regulations on publications of works by citizens of embargoed nations. She later wrote, "Such small steps remind us that by using the political process to change each other's positions, our fates can be intertwined in ways that are more fruitful." It is my absolute honor and privilege to introduce to you Dr. Shirin Ebadi.
While we wait for Dr. Ebadi to reconnect, I'm going to hand over to Amanda Nahaney, who has just joined us to do the land acknowledgement to carry on starting us off in a good way. Over to you, Amanda.
Wojka, Osiam, Yewan Hapton Squalwin. Leilta ant shaman soko shaman, Amanda Nahaney Queen Snas, Tunachan Flas go Homish Or, and Niska Or, Ye one Hatland Swallow and Teat Seats. To you all respected people, my ancestral name is Shamanso. My English name is Amanda Nahaney. It feels really good in my heart to be here today. I had a little bit of technical difficulties trying to sign in, so I'm really happy that it worked out and I'm here. And I just like to take this moment to say a quick prayer and to wish you all well, and to take this opportunity to congratulate Shirin Ebadi, the first Muslim woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. As an extremely wonderful accomplishment. I'm so proud of you. And this is really a huge step for all women. And I'm so honored to be able to share this prayer song to start this off in a good way. Understanding we're in difficult times in the pandemic. And so also with that, I'd like everyone to take this moment when I sing this song. It's a prayer song. A song comes from Sahwalia. Sahwalia lived at Papayak, which is at what you may know now as Brockton Point in Stanley Park. And this song, we sing this today to give thanks for all that we have, for the bounty, for the resources, for the people, for the life giver, the water. And so when I sing this song, I would like you to think of all your loved ones, people you haven't seen in a long time. Maybe you have someone that you know that is sick or hurting right now. Take this time to think about them, send them some good energy, send them some love, and take some time to reflect that we've had some time to be out on the land. And I know I've really taken that time this year to reconnect to nature and to the water. So the song is a prayer song. Let us give thanks for all that we have, for the security and safety that we have, and for each other. So Hoichikosian, this is a prayer song. Oh, 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 he, oh, 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 he, oh, he, oh, oh. Thank you all. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the traditional homelands of the Chamashlium, the Tzleotol, and this Kholtmish. Feels really good in my heart to be here today. Thank you for acknowledging the Indigenous territories and for the Indigenous people of this country. I wish you all well, wish you all safety, and I pray that we all get to come back to visiting each other again. So take care.
Thank you so much, Shamantat. And with that, we'll hopefully hand over back to Dr. Ebadi with fewer technical difficulties.
من قبل از شروع حرفا
Prior to starting my speech, I want to apologize for the issue that occurred. And I hope that it doesn't happen anymore. But instead of me speaking, you listen to this beautiful voice of this lady who was singing for us and playing music. Miss Joy Johnson, a president, respectable president of Simon Fraser University, Center for Comparative and Muslim Studies and Dialogue, Ms. Azadeh Yamini Hamedani, interim director and associate professor of world languages and literatures. And dear friends, I am very glad to talk to you at this university for a second time. It was in 2004 that I got my honorary doctorate degree from this university. And after that, I have had the opportunity to speak at this university. There are many professors, Iranian professors, who teach in Canadian universities, and there are many Iranian students who study in Canadian universities. And this shows the very close cultural relations between the two nations of Iran and Canada. As an Iranian professor, I want to thank you for having accepted Iranian students and generously shared your knowledge with them. Dear friends, today I want to speak about the situation of human rights, specifically women's rights in Islamic countries and also communities. We know that in Islamic countries, women do not enjoy equal rights, and there's discrimination against them. There's gender discrimination. For example, my country, Iran, after the 1979 revolution, which was an Islamic revolution, all of the laws in this country were changed, and the most discriminatory laws against women were passed. For example, pursuant to the law, a man can marry 4 wives. He can divorce his wife whenever he wishes without an excuse. But divorce is very difficult for women. Sometimes it's even impossible. A married woman cannot work or travel without the permission of her husband. The inheritance of girls is half of the inheritance of boys. And also, a girl who wants to get married for the first time, regardless of her age, has to have the permission of her father. There are many, many other discriminatory laws against women. And of course, similar laws can be seen in other Islamic countries. Also, criminal laws like stoning people in cases of adultery, or like maiming people, cutting off hands, the hand of the thief, unfortunately exists and is being enforced. So the most important question is, what is the root of these laws? Can we change these laws? The governments always refer to the Islamic religion as the root of these laws and believe that if someone is a Muslim, they have to respect and observe these laws. However, modern Muslims, whose numbers are growing in Islamic countries, do not accept this way of thinking. They believe that in general, religious laws are divided into two categories. The first category is the laws that pertain to the relationship of individuals with God. It is like praying and it's like fasting. And of course, these laws cannot be changed. And if someone deems oneself a Muslim, then they have to observe such laws. However, no Islamic government has the right to supervise or question the enforcement of such laws. It's like Christians going to churches in Western countries. And we know that no government has the right to question citizens whether they participate or not in churches. The second category of religious laws are laws that pertain to the relationship of people in the society. These are like criminal laws, punishments, family laws, and other laws. These laws can be changed on the basis of the conditions of time and place. Of course, the general spirit of the law has to be protected. I'll give you an example. For example, cutting off the hand of the thief. The spirit of the law is that theft is a bad thing and should not be encouraged in a community. However, whether the punishment of the thief should be cutting off the hand or no, it should be compatible with the time and place. 14 centuries ago in Arabia, there were no prisons. And so that's how the thieves were punished. And at that time, in Western countries, there were instances where thieves were set on fire. But now we are living in the 21st century, and punishments should not go back to 14 or 15 centuries ago. Now we can have imprisonment as a punishment for the thief, or a lockdown in the thief's house with electronic anklets, for example. This means that if someone perpetrates the crime of theft, cannot leave his house for a certain period of time. This way, as we can see, the general spirit of the law has been protected. On the basis of the same argument, modern Muslims believe that there can be compatibility between human rights and commandments of religion. Numerous examples exist. And this is why we see that many of the religious commandments that have been compatible with the conditions of the society have not been able to continue. For example, slavery, it has been abolished all over. But the other question that exists is that when we come to women's rights, why isn't such a thing not happening? So the root of it should be looked at in the patriarchal culture. This culture does not believe in equality of women and men and uses any issue to justify itself. And of course, the religion of Islam, with all the patriarchal interpretations that have taken place, is justified with the laws against women. So there's been a lot said about patriarchal culture. I only want to say that this patriarchal culture exists in all Abrahamian religions. For example, look at the story of creation and Eve. When we look at Abrahamian religions, there's always a sinner. And that is that the whole humanity is being punished because of that person. Now we go back to Eve here. So my question is, who is Eve? What kind of bad thing has she done? Where is heaven? These are all interpretations that men have done on sacred books. If women were to interpret the sacred books, I'm sure that other interpretations and meanings would come out of it. For example, maybe Eve didn't want to listen to an order that was being given to her with closed eyes. Maybe she was curious and wanted to know why she's been bad. Maybe the sin of Eve was her thirst for knowledge. All of these assumptions are acceptable. But unfortunately, I want to ask, which interpretation of the Torah or the Bible or the Quran is there that has been done by women? This is why I say women should learn and understand their religion better so they can find ways to change and amend them. If this doesn't take place until men controlled religion, they're always going to use religion like a baton and hit women on the head and impose their beliefs in the name of religion. For example, I want to ask my Christian friends, why is it that we haven't had a woman pope up to this time? And I have a question for my Muslim friends. Why is it that women always have to pray behind men? Is it not true that we have all been created by one God? So you can see that the root of discrimination is not in religion. It is in the patriarchal culture. And we have to fight that. Modern Muslims expect that the media, civil societies, and universities in Western countries help them with this kind of thinking and bring their voice to the ears of the people all over the world. We have to value the modern Islamic mentality. We have to translate the books and articles of intellectual Muslims and publish them. And most importantly, governments that claim that they respect human rights should not support Islamic fundamental governments until they change their behavior. Let's not forget that many of the fundamental Islamic countries in the Middle East violate human rights. And most of these are friends of the West. And they always speak about cultural relativity. So when they want to sign, for example, commercial agreements or sales of arms, they close their eyes on human rights violations. Pursuant to a report of the United Nations, half of the arms that are produced in the world are sold in the Middle East. And this is why the Middle East is on fire. And at this time, unfortunately, we are witnessing the agreement, the peace agreement between America with the Taliban, who are fundamentalists and have bloody hands. And worse than that is that the government of Afghanistan is not represented in this agreement. And they were not invited for the peace negotiations. Since we're in Canada and in this university, I would like to bring to your attention that unfortunately, many of the laws that pertain to money laundering in Canada are not enforced against Iranians who have invested here. We all know that the government of Iran is financially corrupt. And this has resulted in the expansion of poverty in a very wealthy country. Therefore, the politicians who are thieves or their children usually invest their dirty money in this country and invest it here. And they have also gained a passport, which is a very valid passport. These are all the monies that have been stolen from the people of Iraq. That they are among the claims of the Iranians. And also bringing the government of Iran to the international court for having intentionally shot a Ukrainian passenger plane, which resulted in the murder of all of the passengers, is a claim of all Iranians. They request that. And as on behalf of the people of Iran, as their representative, I want to bring this request here. Please help them in bringing justice. Help them to make the government of Iran accept their responsibility and hold them accountable. Long live the friendship of the people of Iran and Canada. And I want to thank you for having provided me with the opportunity to speak here. And now I am available and I will answer any questions in this regard.
Dr. Ebadi, thank you so much for this very rich talk that touched on the culture of patriarchy, human rights, the role money and money laundering plays in international politics, peace, arms sales, and the inherent contradictions that are present in human rights. There's much to think about. There are many questions that have come in, but before we begin, we will take a 3-minute break and allow everyone to stretch, grab a coffee, a tea, and join us again in 3 minutes. Okay, so I'll ask my question both in English and in Farsi. We have an echo. I don't know what can be done for that. Dr. Ebadi, you've talked about in the beginning about the culture of patriarchy. شما در اول راجع به فرهنگ پدرسالاری صحبت کردین. فرهنگ پدرسالاری صحبت کردین. My question is, what is it that we can do to shift that culture? ما چی کار میتونیم بکنیم که این فرهنگ پدرسالاری رو جلوش وایسیم و باش مبارزه کنیم؟
بله بله. The most important thing is for women to study and learn and understand the laws of their own religion. And not accept everything that's being said to them by men clergy. So go and search for answers. And this is why I have always insisted on the education of women. And I always say that the fact that the Islamic fundamentalists are totally against the education of women and girls is the same thing. Because if you look at the statistics, the Taliban have closed down and set fire to 300 girls' schools. And also, you remember that in Nigeria, the Boko Haram, they attacked girls' schools and abducted them and then used them and abused them. The Taliban sets fire to the girls' schools and the girls may die in the fire. But they don't do this to boys' schools. This is because they are scared of girls' education. Therefore, the key of fighting patriarchal culture is education and also for women to have economic independence. In other words, they have to learn a profession so that they can be attracted by the market and they can have an income. Both knowledge and economic independence is the key to fighting patriarchal culture.
Thank you. Islam, like any other religion, can be used to oppress or liberate women. یعنی از اسلام میشه هم استفاده کرد که زنها بیشتر آزادی داشته باشن یا سرکوب بیشتر باشه. As a legal scholar, how have you been able to use the Islamic tradition to empower women?
به عنوان یک محقق اسلامی چطوری؟ I'm going to speak about my experience, which has helped me a lot. We have to find the solutions from within religion. So for the second and sometimes third time, I browse at religious books and try to see what I can find there. In Iran, fortunately, there are many clergy who think like us. However, since they were not in political power, they couldn't really impact the laws directly. However, the impact that they had was when I asked them for the codes. Then the government could not accuse me of heresy. So I remember that in an important case, the leaders of the Baha'i Faith Society were apprehended by the government and they were going to try them. No attorney had the courage to represent them and defend them. So the leaders came to me. I knew that by accepting this case, the government may accuse me of heresy or call me a Baha'i and accuse me of having converted to the Baha'i faith, and they would punish me. And this is what happened. So the same thing happened, meaning that the government media started writing articles about the fact that Ebadi has left Islam and has converted to the Baha'i faith, and she has to be tried too. What I did was, I asked the opinion of one of the clergy who was very well known in Iran. I asked a question and received a fatwa, a writ. My question was whether a Muslim attorney can represent a Baha'i and defend a Baha'i, and he said yes. If you are certain that the person is innocent, you have to defend them. And you have to use all of what you have access to and prove their innocence if that's the case. So that's what I used in order to respond to the government. So you tell me that I have converted, but a very well-known clergy tells me that it is necessary for me to defend such people. Therefore, I am still in my own religion. It's you who do not know what Islam is. You do not know Islam, and you speak nonsense. We have done this for several times. And fortunately, it has been positive. And this is why I always say, instead of drawing a red line on religion and say that we have to throw religion out, that's not going to happen anyway. Because whether we like it or not, people want their religion. There are a lot of religious people. Therefore, we have to find a way from within the religion. And I think that it is very possible and probable. And this was an experience for me, which was very successful.
Thank you. In your answer, you pointed to the intimidation and bullying tactics that you've experienced. And we had a question come in from someone who is a human rights activist themselves, and someone who has faced intimidation and threats. And her question is, how do you find the courage and the resilience to continue to advocate when the costs are so high?
متوجه شدین میگه علیرغم مزاحمت‌ها و فشارها. The important issue is that one believes in the goal that one has. If you really believe in the goal that you have chosen, then you're not going to be scared of the difficulty of the difficulties that exist in there. However, those who are not sure and hesitate are scared. Also, you can always put your fear aside. You know, fear is an instinct. When human beings face a danger, instinctively they're scared. But if one has a real belief in achieving one's goals, that overcomes the fear and one can continue the path. So only look at the goal. And therefore, you will not be scared of the others who are doing things to deter you, because then they want to push you aside.
Thank you. And I hope that we can all put our fears aside to really stand for the things that we believe in.
امیدوارم همه بتونیم ترسمون رو کنار بذاریم.
What advice would you give to educators and parents who want to raise strong and resilient women to face the challenges of creating a more equitable world?
این میگه که این سوالش در اینه که برای معلمین و ادوکیترها و استادایی که میخوان یک دنیای منصفانه تری ایجاد بکنن چه پیشنهادی توصیه ای داریم؟ بهشون چی میگی؟ The most important thing is to encourage your students to be curious and to be able to criticize, to see things critically. The first thing that one has to learn is what Descartes told us. I look at Descartes as the most important philosopher, because he was the one who always doubted and gave us the examples. So we have to teach the young people that they should go after the truth. Once they read something, once they understand something, they shouldn't accept it right away. So the best thing that a professor can teach their student is to be curious and to go after it, to find the truth.
Dr. Ebadi, you just mentioned Descartes, and we know that your that you love Persian poetry and literature. My question to you is, which writer provides you with solace and with support in the work that you do? Which Iranian writer?
Which کدوم شاعر ایرانی رو میگه؟ من صداش نشنیدم. میگه میدونم به ادبیات علاقه‌مندین و به شعر علاقه. As you know, in Iran, we've had many good poets, and you know that the Persian language is the language of poetry. There's music in this language. And I can say that most Iranians are poets. For example, when we Iranians talk to each other, usually we recite a poem when we're speaking. So maybe the message of a whole book can be written in one line of poetry. Therefore, so maybe if I tell you that every evening I read like poetry every evening for like what, half hour every day. I like many of them. I like Rumi from the older ones. Mm. And I like Simine Behbahani from the and Shamlu when it comes to the newer and younger generation of poets.
I want to turn to an important anniversary that we've had during the past couple of days. This year marks the 10th year anniversary of the Egyptian Revolution. And in your memoir, watching the events unfold, and in response to friends who were adamant that no one could snatch away their revolution, you write that you wanted to say to them, and I quote, "Look at me, I supported the revolution that ended up stripping me of my judgeship. I helped the revolt that was seized by Islamists, leading to the collapse of my career, the collapse of the rights of women entirely." End of quote. In your opinion, what can we do to prevent revolutions and liberation movements from swapping one oppressive face for another?
خب میدونی که امسال 10مین سالگرد میگه که شما به ما بگین که به جای انقلاب چه میتونیم بکنیم. Revolutions are certainly going to create issues. One of them is chaos that's created in the society. I do remember that I was witnessing a scene in Egypt that women were rallying, demonstrating. And in order to send women home, what they did was they harassed them on the street, meaning that in a report that I could see, it was a live report. The reporter was preparing her report and reporting. And it was in a short period of time that a bunch of men surrounded her. And in front of the camera, they were going to rip her clothes. And this chaos resulted in a martial law taking over in Egypt. And people did not achieve their wants. Prior to the revolution, there was a martial. Well, what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, the military was in charge. However, the most important thing is that when a government is not meritorious and cannot work, civil society has to be strengthened. And through civil society, topple the government. The benefit of this is that after the toppling of the government, civil society can create public order and not let chaos take over until a new government is formed. Because when there's chaos in a society and there's no organization and no public order, a dictator may take over. And this is not what people want.
And yet it seems that when there is that vacuum of power, what tends to happen most of the time is that you do have a dictator who comes and takes over. But I don't want to take too much time. And I'd like to allow Amal also to ask questions that were coming in live. But before I pass it over, I'd like to ask you one last question. If there was one change to the predicament of women that you would like to witness in our lifetime, what would that be?
اگه شما بخواین یک تغییری رو در زندگی زنان در زندگی ما در دوران ما ببینین، اون چی هست؟ The most important thing that I wish for is for women to have confidence. Unfortunately, one of the ramifications and consequences of the patriarchal culture is that women lose their confidence. A woman who has confidence in herself and knows that she can stand on her own feet and does not need the help of others, then that woman can fight for her rights. But the issue is where women lose their confidence. Therefore, I go back to the issue of upbringing. This means we have to teach confidence. We have to help women so that women accept that they can resolve their issues. Problems can only be solved when the person has the power to overcome that problem. So we shouldn't be scared of losing. Any failure can be an introduction to victory, a victory that comes later. Therefore, let me tell the young people who are listening to me, and this is for young girls, and I want you to do this in your room tonight. Try to make a hurdle by putting pillows on top of each other and trying to jump over. Instinctively, you take a step back in order to be able to jump the hurdle. What I mean is the pillows that you have created, put together. I want to ask you to do this. You will see that unconsciously, you will take a step back. I look at each failure the same. This means that when you fail in something, don't think that everything has come to an end. No. You are getting ready for a larger victory. When I look at my own past, I see that any failure that I've had has resulted in a larger victory for me. Therefore, don't be scared of failure. Have confidence, keep it, and know that one day you will achieve all of your dreams.
Thank you so much for this wonderful response. I now really look forward to failing. You made it sound so wonderful. And now I will pass it over to Amal.
حالا میخوام ببینم که به دیگران به عمل بدم ببینم صدای اونو ما داریم حالا.
Thank you, Dr. Ebadi. It's such an honor to
خیلی متشکرم.
this conversation with you today. I'm going to be pulling some of the live questions that are coming in and posing them to you. So the first question I'm going to ask is around the topic of international governments and what they can do to help. The question is, based on your experience, do you think Western engagement and economic relations hurt or help advance the advancement of human rights in countries like Iran? And on a similar note, how should governments balance intolerance for oppressive regimes with the reality that systemic change cannot happen overnight?
Okay, Amal, unfortunately, I cannot hear you properly.
Oh.
You break up.
Oh. Okay, let me try to speak a little bit more slowly, and if the problem persists, maybe I can put the question in the chat. Does that sound okay? Okay. So the question is, based on your experience, do you think Western engagement and economic relations hurt or help advance human rights in countries like Iran? And on a similar note, how should governments balance intolerance for oppressive regimes, considering that systemic change cannot happen overnight?
Okay. Okay, am I understanding this correctly, that do you mean like economic sanctions Or when you speak about economic aid, what do you mean by that?
I think the question is mostly based on economic sanctions, if I understand correctly, and how governments internationally can regulate their interactions with countries like Iran to help advance human rights.
خب حالا بگیم با توجه به تحریم‌های اقتصادی چطوری میتونه ایران مبارزه بکنه با اون مثلا و یا دولت‌هایی مثل ایران؟ Economic sanctions harm the people. And I am against economic sanctions. But there have to be smart sanctions. For example, in Iran, the government monopolizes the radio and television, meaning the media. That means the private sector cannot interfere in that. But the government of Iran does have many programs in different languages, like English, Arabic, French, and other languages. And it's all propaganda. And therefore, they want to trick Muslim countries and Muslim people, and they are on satellites. And the satellites are all Western satellites, usually European satellites. So therefore, Iranians should not be able to use the satellite. This means that the microphone of the government of Iran will be closed down without the people being harmed. But now, the government of Iran uses these satellites but the economic sanctions have resulted in the expansion of poverty. Besides the fact that all the cronies of the government, those who are close to the politics and to the political powers, they have gained a lot of dirty money. Therefore, in a country like Iran, sanctions have to be such that it weakens the government, but people not be harmed. فقط از طریق شما آره؟ آره.
Thank you, Dr. Ebadi, for that answer. Another question we have from the audience, which is also related to people and how they can help countries back home internationally, is from someone from the diaspora. They say, I'm an immigrant and I often see injustices in my homeland on the news. Do you have any suggestions for the larger community in the diaspora who are anxiously seeing injustices and atrocities in the news? And on a similar note, what do you think international communities can do to help countries back home with the human rights atrocities that are going on?
با توجه به اینکه حقوق بشر با توجه به اینکه حقوق بشر در خیلی از این کشورهای در حال توسعه داره نادیده گرفته میشه، شما فکر می‌کنید جامعه بین الملل چی کار میتونه بکنه در این مورد؟ Unfortunately, when it comes to commercial agreements, governments forget about human rights. Therefore, what I ask people and what I ask the Western media, what I ask from the civil society and the media in the West is to make your government respect human rights and not sign agreements with countries that violate human rights until they change their behavior. For example, look at Canada. You people who live in Canada can ask your government, in the case of the passenger plane that was intentionally shut down, that this is a crime against humanity, and Canada can bring a claim against Iran. A year has passed since the government of Iran committed this crime. And a number of Iranian Canadian citizens were on that plane. Therefore, pursuant to international law, the government of Canada has the right to hold the government of Iran accountable. It's been 1 year that the government of Iran has committed this crime and is not willing to provide information. And they're not willing to say why they did this, what they did. This is a murder case. And the government of Canada, pursuant to international law, can bring a complaint against Iran at the international court. So I want to ask every Canadian citizen to do this as soon as possible. The government of Iran should be mandated and obliged to respond to people. Why did they kill people? Therefore, when I'm in Western countries, I talk to people because they're the ones who vote. And I ask for media's help to bring our voice to the world. And the governments have to hear the voice of the civil society in Iran.
Thank you for that very clear and concrete point of action. I think one thing we can all do today is, after this webinar, go and learn more about the incident if you don't already know about it. Our next question is about the youth, Muslim youth. Do you think that the distancing of younger Muslims away from associating themselves with Islam is largely due to the lack of a mainstream moderate voice of the religion?
در مورد جوانان مسلمان سوال دارم. آیا فکر میکنی اینکه جوانان مسلمان مذهب اسلام رو رها کردن به خاطر اینی که صدای مسلمانان مدرن رو نمیشنوند؟ That's one of the reasons. Of course, there are other reasons for that. One of them being the degrading behavior of some of the people in the West with their Muslim citizens. For example, in schools, in the university, they don't socialize with them. They're humiliated. As a result, one of the reactions of the Muslim youth is to deny the fact that they're Muslims so that they can be attracted by the society and accepted. So if the modern Muslims and intellectual Muslims have voices that can be heard, the Muslim youth will regain their confidence, and also the non-Muslims, the non-Muslim youth will understand that our cultures are close. And if there is a difference, it is because of the fundamentalists and the governments that exist, or terrorist groups that have come up as a result of fundamentalism. Therefore, if we get together, all the differences will be wiped out, and the Muslims will not be humiliated, and they will regain their confidence, and there is no reason to have to convert. Of course, people are free, and they have to be able to freely elect their religion or not even believe in any religion. There are many people who are agnostics or atheists. They're free. But a Muslim young person who will try to pretend that he's not a Muslim in order to look like the rest of the people in the society, and does not have confidence, has to know how he can, or she can, solve their issues.
You touched upon the topic of discrimination. This relates to another question that we had about representation in mainstream media. Often Muslims are depicted in negative portrayals in mainstream media, in literature, or in books or movies. How much of a role do you think accurate representation plays, and what do you think is an accurate representation in your opinion?
شما فکر میکنین در میدیا چگونه باید این مسئله مطرح بشه؟ چگونه باید این نمایندگی مسلمون ها نشون داده بشه؟ That's a very interesting question. I think that some of the Western media help Islamophobia. For example, if a Muslim commits a wrong, for example, domestic violence, they usually write, for example, Mustafa, who is a Muslim, hit his wife or threw his wife out of the house. But if a European or a Christian person does that, they don't say George, who is a Christian. They just say George hit his wife or did the wrong. Therefore, if a wrong is done by a Muslim, most media want to exasperate it. They want to create fear in the people. And people think that all Muslims are violent and are fundamentalists. Whereas For example, the worst behavior that we see is done by China. Look at the Uyghur issues in China. 1 million of the Muslims, 1 million of them are like in an army base. It's sort of like an army base where they are locked down and they want to educate them, ideological education. Is it acceptable that one is like locked down in order to be educated? Yeah. No one writes about that. I visited the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, and I saw myself what behavior the Buddhists who were from Myanmar had done with the Muslims in that country. Do we hear anything about the violence of the Buddhists against the Rohingya in the Western media? No. But if there is a minority group in among the Muslims, they always write about it. Do you know that in the Bosnian War in Europe, what the Christians did to the Muslims in Bosnia? How many people did they kill? Do you read anything or see anything in the media? Therefore, unfortunately, some of the Western media help Islamophobia and try to show that Muslims are violent. This doesn't help anything. We have to bring people together, not to distance them from each other.
Thank you. That was a very profound analysis of Western news outlets. That's all the time we have for live questions. I'm going to be passing the mic back to Azadeh, who will be continuing the session.
دیگه ما وقت نداریم برای سوال. حالا برمیگردیم به آزاده جون.
Dr. Ebadi, thank you so much. We would like to ask you one final question.
متشکریم و میخوام از شما یک سوال بکنم.
If you talked about the importance of self-esteem for women.
اعتماد به نفس زنان صحبت کردیم.
If there was one lesson women should live by, what, in your opinion, should that lesson be?
I gave you an exercise for young women for this evening. So I want to give you another example of my own life. As you heard, I was very young when I became a judge. And I really loved my judgeship profession. When the revolution occurred, because of being a woman, I was demoted and I lost my job. Of course, I became very upset. But I kept that within me. And I made that like an engine, like a motor to start working more. I didn't let that ruin me. As a result, I worked many times as much. As you know, I had a husband and 2 young girls, and I had to work in order to help with the income of the family, which means that I both worked outside and I had young children. And after all the housework and all that, I would start writing at 10 p.m. It was many nights. I would find myself snoozing on the table that I was writing, meaning that I had to shower and change and go to work, because I had decided to do something to make the government regret. I was a good judge. They lost me. So I worked so hard until I received the Nobel Peace Prize, after receiving different prizes. When I was giving my speech at the Nobel ceremony, and through satellites all over the world was watching me, and I knew that the head of the judiciary was certainly watching the ceremony. I was thinking maybe we shouldn't have fired this woman, and we could have said that it was one of our judges who won the Nobel Peace Prize. And that's when my anger came to an end, because I thought that I had gotten even with the person who had taken the profession that I really loved. Therefore, you can convert your anger to a motor to start and doing more work. Don't let your anger bring you down. On top of crying, you can do many other things. So get up, and if they push you back, don't worry about it. Don't lose your confidence. And this anger that exists in you, convert it into a power that you can work more and achieve your goals. It's only through this that no one can break you, and you will be unbreakable.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ebadi, for your strength, for your resilience, for all the wonderful work that you've done over the years, for all the injustices that you've stood up against, for speaking truth to power. And I sincerely hope that all the girls, young women who are listening will heed your advice and will turn their anger into a positive force in the world. We will all be jumping over our pillows tonight. And I also want to thank you for pointing out that an equitable world and a just world is the responsibility of all of us. No one person can do it alone.
منصفانه تری ایجاد کنیم هممون باید مسئول باشیم.
And I hope that we will see you in the future and see all of your
امیدواریم در
wonderful work.
آینده شما رو ببینیم.
Thank you so much for taking the time today. I will now pass it to Asma.
و خیلی متشکریم از اینکه امروز در برنامه ما شرکت کردیم. Thanks to you and all of your colleagues who provided me with this opportunity.
Thank you from me as well, Dr. Ebadi. I'm very inspired at the way that you have been able to deal with the complexity of talking about Muslim oppression in the world, and also the way Muslim women are oppressed in Muslim countries.
خیلی متشکریم از کارهایی که برای زنان مسلمان و همینطور دموکراسی در کشورهای اسلامی کردیم.
It's not often that we see people grappling with the complexity of the Muslim tradition. They say that people are taught not to talk about politics and religion, and you found a way to bring these conversations to life.
و شما هستین که به ما میگین، یعنی این فرهنگ غنی اسلامی رو شناختیم و به ما میگین که امکان تطابق فرهنگ اسلامی با دموکراسی وجود داره.
And I really appreciate this critical friendship that you have with the tradition.
و خیلی متشکرم از اینکه شما به هر حال احترام میذارین به این مذهب.
If you'll allow one more question that came in, it's, you know, often in these conversations, it's Muslim women speaking to Muslim women or speaking to other women, and men are missing from the conversation. What is the role that Muslim men have to play in this conversation around women's rights, particularly in our own community?
خب حالا به عنوان آخرین سوال میخوام از شما بپرسم نقش مردان مسلمان چیه در این مورد؟
Aslam, can you ask the question again, please?
سوالو میخواد دوباره بپرسه.
Sure.
Mr.
The question is
Sobek,
around the role of Muslim men within the communities in supporting women's rights.
سوالم
ببینید، من وقتی که صحبت از فرهنگ پدرسالار میکنم،
When I speak about the patriarchal culture, I don't only mean males. What I mean is the wrong culture that does not accept equality of human beings. Although women are victims of this wrong behavior and culture, but sometimes they convey this culture as well. Let's not forget that men who impose their views have been raised by a woman, meaning their mother. So mothers have to stop the conveyance of this culture to their sons. When I talk about the patriarchal culture, I usually think of hemophilia, which is a disease. It's a genetic disease. And mothers only pass it to their sons. This means that when there's a cut, there can be a lot of bleeding. And this is a genetic disease. So the mother who has this gene does not convey this to her girls, her daughters, but her sons will be impacted by this gene. In reality, the patriarchal culture is the same. Like, look at the men who bully. Look at the behavior of their mothers in the family. Have they treated them the same as their daughters? Has the behavior been equal towards the girls and the boys? Or they have always given freedom to the son? They have respected the son? And the daughters were limited. For example, when we look at Muslim families, if the daughter of the family before getting married socializes with other men, this is not acceptable. However, in the same family, it's interesting to know that if the son has different lovers, they think that it's a privilege for him. And they don't see that as an issue. This son certainly will not accept equality of human beings in the future. Therefore, if we want to cut this patriarchal culture, put an end to it, we have to have the families treat their girls and boys the same. Girls should have the same rights that boys do. And whatever freedom the son of the family has, the girl should have as well, the daughter should have as well. And they should be raised equal. This will end the patriarchal culture. So I want to conclude that the role of the women is very important. Of course, men should believe in equality as well, but women are the ones who convey it.
Thank you very much. So just to wrap up, we're going to thank the various departments that were involved in making this event possible. Thank you to the School for International Studies, the Department of World Languages and Literatures, Gender, Sexuality and Women's Studies, History, Humanities, Criminology, the School of Communication, the Global Asia Program, the Center for Education, Law and Society, the Mirhadi Lecture Series in Iranian Studies, the Stravos Niarchos Foundation Center in Hellenic Studies, in addition to the Nobel Women's Initiative and Shiva Padkal. As you can see, it took so many people to make this event possible, so thank you to all of them. Thank you to all of the participants as well. I'm going to hand over to Zaria for the final words.
Thank you, Aslam. Colleagues, friends, and guests, this now brings us to the end of our event. On behalf of all of us, I would like to express our sincerest gratitude to Dr. Ebadi for sharing with us her cross-cultural views and experiences, her pioneering efforts to fight patriarchal culture, and for her invaluable advice on resiliency, perseverance, and overcoming fear. Dr. Ebadi, your courage and compassion, together with the confidence you exude, is truly inspiring, particularly to me and others of my generation who strive to define and identify ourselves as modern Muslim women. In these times where democracy is tested more and more so than ever before, your voice, your determination, and your personal sacrifices stand as a beacon of hope, a beacon for equity that shines a path and guides us all towards a more fair and balanced society. Your devotion to advancing human rights, particularly for women and children, through enlightenment and dialogue, teaches us how we here can continue your work, match your strides, and advocate for equality and justice for women around the world. On behalf of the SFU Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogue and the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies, we would like to thank Dr. Ebadi and Shirin Ebadi for taking the time to be with us today. I would also like to express our thanks to Amanda Nihani and Dr. Joy Johnson for opening our event today, to our facilitators Azadeh, Aslam, and Amal, our fantastic behind-the-scenes tech team, and last but not least, Alice Francis for leading our center's partnership on this event. I, of course, could not end today's dialogue without thanking each of you who have joined in from around the world and spent the last 2 hours with us. Thank you for being here, holding this space, and guiding our conversation with your thoughtful questions. We hope that you enjoyed today's session with Dr. Ebadi. A recording of this event will be made available on YouTube for sharing in the coming days. Thank you again for joining us. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day. Khudafis.